Alrighty, welcome back to another tier list video, this time for legs. I know I've been away for a little bit. I got really sick and I was unable to speak, unable to breathe, unable to hear. That was a whole mess. So, we are back. There may be a couple of quick cuts if I do get a little coughing fit going, but either way, I wanted to bring this to you. So, as we get started, you may see there is another visual this time on the tier list. So I am capturing the wiki as I pull these items up so you can actually see the passive and read through it yourself, as well as being able to see the stats a little bit easier. Before we get started, same rules apply. We're talking about most normal runs, so we're not talking about any specific builds that might make these items better or worse. We're just trying to apply our grading here, or our tier here, based on most runs. So with that said, we can hop right into it. So our first item, as you can see, is bindings. So bindings give 2 defense, -3 speed, and then a passive that reads +3 petrify on attack if attacking second in combat. Bindings are pretty solid for white legs. The white legs are kind of a weaker collection of items, but bindings is definitely pretty solid. The -3 speed feeds right into the passive because you want to be attacking second, so dropping that speed early in the match. The only possible creatures that you might not attack first are like fire hives, so you basically guarantee the passive if you pick this item up first. Plus, it gives some defense, which is nice, and the +3 petrify attack is unmitigatable damage, so that gives you a lot of offense in one item. It gives you a lot of offense and a lot of defense all in the same item. And as a person who doesn't go speed very often, this item's just really, really solid all around. Alright, so our next item is Fancy Tights. So, Fancy Tights, overall pretty good. You get health and you get defense. 1 point of defense, 2 points of health, which is pretty solid. Those together make you significantly more tanky than only getting one of those stats. You also get a little bit of speed, which is pretty negligible. I usually don't pick this up for the speed. It's usually for the tankiness. And as you can see, there is no passive. Excuse me. So these kind of fall like pretty middle of the line. They're decent. I'll pick them up over others. Excuse me, but I won't necessarily seek these out. They're just kind of a nice stat stick. Next item, Fire Dance. So Fire Dance is one of those items that they can be really good, but making them work is kind of like a Tiara build where you have to get this really specific setup of items and things of that nature. But anyways, they give 1 attack, 3 HP, and then the passive reads creatures take 3x explode damage if you have 6 or fewer items equipped. So the 6 or fewer items equipped does allow you to utilize this pretty well, you know, for the early portions of the game, because it does take a little while to get those 6 items filled. However, there are a couple nuances about that explode damage. So obviously you need to be able to detonate explosive enemies on other enemies. So if you don't have a way to mitigate yourself taking explosive damage, this can be a little tricky to play around. You know, you just kind of have to lure fire beads, and if they're not really in the right spot, then, you know, that can be a little bit kind of dicey to play around. This damage also, I believe, does get capped at 99 damage or 100 damage, so the explode damage can't actually go above that. That was just some hearsay. I haven't actually tested that myself, just because I don't use Fire Dance very often. However, at least for its passive. However, that's definitely something to consider as well. Otherwise, we have 1 attack and 3 health on the item, which is the main reason I normally pick it up, which is pretty solid. You really can't complain too much about that. It's some nice survivability in the early game. If you don't, you know, if you're having trouble picking up defense and all you can find is health, 3 health is a pretty large increase. And then the 1 attack is always just kind of nice because you'll probably end up building some attack somewhere in the build. So this, again, kind of falls in the same place as Fancy Tights. I'm just basically picking this up for the stats. The passive I could do or do without. It can be nice for taking out like some, you know, rot hounds or things of that nature in the early game if you have some low defense. So definitely still pretty solid. Alrighty, next up is the guards item. So guards is something that I think I've overvalued in the past. I would probably tend to leave it at B still, but it's arguably not as good as these other items, so I guess I'll see what I can talk myself into. So guards give you +2 defense and -1 speed, kind of similar to bindings. However, the passive isn't nearly as potent as bindings. So guards give you a +5% parry chance. That's just a flat parry chance increase. So if you were going to parry for 10%, or 20%, you'd parry for 25. It is nice, but it's not nearly as impactful as the bindings passive. You do get your tankiness, which is really the main focus of this item, and the parry chance kind of doubles over with that, because the more defense you have, the higher your parry chance goes. So the 5% is like a nice intermediary when you're building defense to try and kind of break that next threshold to get from like 20% to 40% or 40% to 60%. But it's only by 5%, so the higher your parry chance is, the less impactful that feels. I'd say it probably does land in B, because it's still good for early tankiness. Those early points of defense are so strong that, you know, this is always going to kind of get some value. So I'll leave it in B for now. All right, next one is shorts. This is an item I avoid pretty often. So shorts, as you can see, -1 defense, +1 speed, +3 HP, and then +1 poison on attack. So if I'm thinking about white items and I want to get some poison from my white items, I'm going the dagger, poison dagger. I'm not going shorts because, one, it's only 1 poison per attack, so you can't actually stack it up. It'll be consumed in your, you know, combat phase that you apply it. So it's basically just like 1 unmitigatable damage. And then you also lose defense while gaining HP, which isn't the end of the world, but in the early game, my focus is defense, so I very rarely pick up shorts. If I have no other better options, I might pick them up, and sometimes I even discard them. So I think they're kind of lackluster, but I mean, if you already have some defense and you need some extra health, they can be nice if you're going to speed build. Obviously, it gives you a point of speed, but otherwise, definitely not my favorite. All right, skirt. Skirt is really solid. So, as you can see, skirt gives us +2 attack, +2 HP, and -1 clarity. But that clarity is made up for in the passive. So the passive gives you +1 health gain from potions. This is pretty potent, especially in the early game. So your normal, at 0 clarity, your normal potions heal you for 3, your large potions heal you for 10. So healing for 4 specifically, the 11 isn't a huge deal because you're already healing for 10, but healing for 4 instead of 3 is pretty big. Also, the fact that it gives you health makes you all around feel a little bit more survivable because you're kind of double dipping. You're getting that extra health and the extra healing. And the +2 attack on a white item, with everything else that this has going for it, is pretty solid. I sometimes keep these very late into the run. I think overall they're pretty good. I would say I'd probably pick skirt up over most of these other items almost every run, so I think I'll bump them up to A with bindings. If I had either one of these, it would really come down to, you know, what I need more, whether it be survivability or attack, but I think they're pretty similar in their potency in different areas. All right, next one, Waiting Rags. I love some Waiting Rags. So Waiting Rags is the one item that can lure me into building speed. So especially if we're talking about a normal run. First we'll go over the stats. So 1 defense, which isn't crazy, but it's nice, and then 2 speed. But the passive is really where this item makes its money. So intimidate poisonous creatures on attack. Poisonous creatures tend to be pretty quick. But they also tend to stack up quite a bit of damage just because of how poison works. It stacks every time you apply more poison. So this item can pretty much solve poison creatures for you for the entire run if you build speed. If you don't build speed, it's useless, just as any other Intimidate item is. If you don't have enough speed to outspeed the creature, the Intimidate isn't going to do anything. However, especially for normal runs, you only need 21 speed to outspeed pretty much everything in the dungeon up until your final path that you take. If you end up going the light path, you're going to need significantly more speed, but if you end up taking the Owl's path, the only things that'll really outspeed you, I forget if the Owl outspeeds you, but then also the baby version of the Loom Birds will outspeed you with 21 speed. But again, that's not really why you're picking up this item. You're picking it up for the poisonous creatures. And as far as like Viscid Unions and Plague Bearers go, this can be really, really helpful, like I said, even into the late game. So if I'm building some speed, I would also say, you know, that this would be right up with A. And even though this requires quote-unquote kind of a specific build where you're building speed, the reason I would put this at A for most builds is because you're picking this up early. So you're going to know very, very early on if you're going to be building into speed or not, which is one of the reasons that I ranked another item in one of the other tier lists pretty high, even though I was saying it's across most builds, because your white items are kind of, they can be your defining items for a build, or at least how you get started. So if I pick these up, I'm committing to building some speed. All right, next up we got Dark Pants. So Dark Pants are kind of like an upgraded version of, I say an upgraded version, they're like a higher tier version of Fancy Tights. So Dark Pants give you 1 defense, 2 HP, 5% crit, and 5% dodge. You know, Dark Pants, they're fine, but they're not really something I seek out, which is kind of unfortunate. I think the blue tier of pants are particularly weak. I guess maybe I was thinking blue as opposed to white. White is pretty solid, but the blue tier, they definitely struggle a bit. So with no passive and just a couple of stats with some secondary stats slapped on top, I almost would sometimes prefer Fancy Tights over these if my speed is benefiting me at all. But they're okay. I mean, they give you some tankiness. You're getting the defense and the health in the same item, so that's, you know, solid as it is. The crit and the dodge, they don't even exist when I'm looking at this item, because unless I'm already building into either one of those stats, they're not really going to make a huge world of difference for you. I'd say this item, honestly, I'm only going to be picking this up if I have no other options and my slot's empty. I'd say this could almost be considered like along with the white items. It doesn't even feel like a blue item to me. All right, next is an item I certainly undervalue, which is Ghostly. So, Ghostly. +2 speed, -2 HP, and the passive gives you +10% stealth chance, and you can pass blockers. The reason that I've undervalued this is because it takes away from your HP. However, and it gives you speed. So those are two things that I'm generally not looking for, because I normally don't really care about speed unless I'm building Waiting Rags, and since they're in the same slot, I wouldn't be building Waiting Rags. And then the -HP, I generally build very tanky, so losing HP isn't generally something I'm looking for in one of my first blue items. But I've neglected the passive of this item. So 10% stealth chance is a fair amount of stealth. Like, you can certainly win some stealth chances when passing creatures with 10%. And then the ability to pass blockers. So I love Endurance, which is another item that allows you to pass blockers, for the reason that you can pass blockers, but that also gives you a bunch of health. This gives you the opportunity to pass blockers much earlier in the game, which makes rooms like Patience really, really valuable. You can basically walk around to Patience, pick up all the loot, and leave just by having this item, which you can possibly pick up for free. So, overall, I think Ghostly is pretty solid. Because its stats are kind of weak, but its passive strong, I'd still say it probably falls into B. But that passive is definitely not something to be slept on. If you have nothing else in the slot, it's definitely not a bad pickup. All right. Next, we've got Grounding Force. So, Grounding Force, we get 1 attack, 1 defense, minus some speed, and every 4 attacks inflict a critical hit. To be honest, I don't really see these often, I feel like. Like, regardless of how often I pick them up, I feel like I don't find these very often when I'm, like, cycling through my rerolls on blue chests. So I haven't used them a ton, but, I mean, I guess I can't say that. I've used them plenty, but it's definitely not something that, like, I get really excited about when I see them. The attack and defense are definitely nice, just kind of padding your stats. The minus speed I usually don't care about, because speed is arguably the weakest out of those stats. And then the passive. So every 4 attacks inflict a critical hit. It's very much similar to like boots or cold-blooded or any of those items that proc after a certain amount of combat turns. The reason that it's not very impactful on Grounding Force when you pick Grounding Force up is because you probably don't have a ton of attack built at this point, nor anything else that's going to like enhance your critical damage or critical chance or anything like that. So it kind of just feels like instead of like, you know, gently whacking them with your weapon, you're hitting them with just a little more force. Like, my point is, it's not very impactful to your run when you pick these up. It can definitely be helpful later into the run, just like with boots. Like, I mean, boots you could keep the entire run and you'll feel that value. Grounding Force, as you get later into the run, you could definitely start to feel that value once you've built up some more attack. But the problem is the purple and gold pants are so much more valuable than what Grounding Force brings to the table that the chances of hanging on to these into your late game is pretty low. So again, decent stats, okay passive. The speed I don't really care about, so we're probably slapping that right in B. All right, next we've got, oh gosh, are all of these going to be B? Now I'm like looking through them, I'm like, man, all of these items just seem like decent at best. All right, we got Hermits Pockets. Hermits Pockets is kind of an interesting item. So the value on Hermits Pockets changes quite a bit depending on how much you already have when you pick this item up. So you get -3 attack, -3 defense, -3 speed, which for face value looks horrible. But the passive reads, fill all empty slots with junk on equip. I don't know if I can show you. Hopefully this will show up. I'll kind of like skim through these so that you might be able to see them on the little extra capture I got. But I'll read them off to you real quick. So the items you get, one gives you 1 point of attack and health. Another gives you 2 clarity. Another gives you 1 attack, 1 speed. There's one that gives you +1 defense, 1 clarity. 1 defense, 1 speed. 1 health, 1 clarity. And then there are scroll and book slots that do 1 slot for, or 1 damage for the book slot and 2 damage for the scroll slot. So overall, you generally come out, if you have like, I'd say 5 or 6 slots or more available, you generally come out with a net positive with this item. But if you've built up, you know, 7, 8, 9 items, you're probably going to end up losing stats on this. It can be nice if you can eventually get rid of this item without saving the stats. So like with a, like by replacing it or, you know, something of that nature. Like if you can get rid of these after getting the junk, they can be okay. But you've kind of got a lot of variables there, and you generally only earn a few points in the stats that you lose from picking up the items. So it's really not all that great. Honestly, the value I generally get out of this in a normal, like in a regular run, is that of a white item. So I'd say for blue items purpose, it's probably C tier. I don't really highly recommend this unless you've got a completely empty inventory. Then you'll probably get like +3 or 4 stats in a lot of your stats. Obviously you get like the HP and the clarity as well, which don't have negatives. But yeah, overall, I'm looking for a better blue item if I see these roll. All right, next we've got Spiked. Man, Spiked I have such a wild relationship with. So Spiked gives us +2 defense, -1 speed, and the passive reads reflect 2 damage when hit. Spiked is like the epitome of feast or famine. That 2 reflect damage can be enormous when you're proccing it on enemies that you're trying to chip down. or it can be a death sentence if you try and pass over a fire bead and explode and take all that explosive damage. More often than not, I find myself taking unnecessary damage with Spiked, rather than benefiting from its passive. It's kind of it's a very volatile item. But when it is working, and if you start combining it with other spiked items, you can do significant amounts of damage with that reflect, because you have spiked, you have the spiked chest plate, and then you also have spiked shield. So all three of those together, I think, give you a total of, I think it's 5 for shield, 3 for chest, 2 for spiked. So potentially 10 damage that you're reflecting back. I think the shield is just unparried, but I think the spiked reflect damage when hit also counts on a parry. I'd have to double check myself on that, but regardless, in combination they can be nice. By itself, not the best. Its stats are, I mean, honestly, spiked is just a worse bindings that can kill you. It has arguably the same stats. I guess you get some, less of a detriment to your speed, but the passive on bindings is significantly better than spiked, which I shouldn't be saying because this is a more rare of an item. I'd rather just have damage that I can control as opposed to damage that might kill me because I pass over a fire bead. And when I pass over that fire bead, there happens to be a fire hive on the other side that I couldn't see yet, and I'd explode and die. So I'm actually going to drop these down. I have a personal distaste for these. They can be okay. I wouldn't recommend them. All right, next we've got Alchemy Belt. Alchemy Belt gives us -2 defense, +2 speed, +6 HP. And you gain souls for explode damage taken. Now, this can be solid for a Hungry Sun build, but like I said, we're talking about most builds here. So, generally, this is the lowest valued purple leg slot out of all the purple leg slots. The HP can be nice. If I have like an absolute ton of defense and I need some HP, that's the only reason I'm picking this up. I pretty much ignore the passive, gaining souls for explode damage taken. If you don't have a way to mitigate that explode damage, then you're just going to be taking damage for minimal soul gain. I believe the soul gain equals the amount of damage taken. So if you take 6 explode damage, you'll get 6 souls. I mean, Soul Stealer just is way better than this, which is also a white item. So, like I said, unless you need the HP or the speed, this item's kind of garbage, in my opinion. Good for Hungry Sun. Otherwise, I'd probably say it's D tier. I will never pick this up unless I literally have like single-digit HP. All right, next item is Impactful. Impactful is an item I always want to use, but I never really get the chance to. So we lose 3 attack, we gain 2 defense, gain 4 HP, which already makes it a very, very tanky item. And then the passive being that it gives your splash damage +1 range. So basically when you attack an item or an enemy with splash, that splash damage is going to do damage to the left and right cards if it can, like if they're enemies. With Impactful equip, your splash damage will do damage to not only the cards directly to the left and right, but to 2 cards to the left and right. So effectively you would hit 5 enemies, the one that you hit, and then it would splash out in 2 cards each direction. With a splash build, this is really, really good. You can just decimate rooms if you have a fair amount of splash damage built, like a, I think it's Battering Shield, or, like I always want to say Flower Power, the Power Relic that gives you some splash, Thunder Step, Quaking Hammer, stuff like that. But if you don't have those items, it's basically just kind of a mid-tier defensive item. Stats are still really good on it. Giving up the attack kind of hurts because generally when you're getting into your purples, you're looking for those significant power spikes. But if you have no other options, I'd say it's probably B. It's decent, but there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to make use of the passive. And because of that, losing the attack kind of feels kind of feels bad, because that's the whole reason we're losing the attack, right? Because we're expected to get more out of our splash later on. A decent item, though. I pick it up just on the chance that I pick up a splash item later. All right, next item is Jousting Pants. Jousting Pants are pretty decent overall. So Jousting Pants give +1 attack, +1 defense, +4 speed. So if you are a speed enthusiast, it's definitely a pretty good purple item for speed, especially in the leg slot where you generally don't get a ton of speed, as we've seen up until this point. And then the passive reads +1 temporary attack. Oh, I think I got it. There we go. +1 temporary attack on successful stealth. So the passive is basically useless unless you have stealth. If you have stealth, it can be nice, but it's kind of one of those items where it's like, okay, I'm going to stealth back and forth a bunch of times until I get enough attack to one-shot this enemy, because I don't want to take damage from that enemy. Overall, it's fine. Not something I normally seek out. I'd say for general use in most builds, I probably value Impactful higher. Simply because I get guaranteed tankiness out of Impactful, whereas with this I get okay stats and then a passive I might be able to use or I might not. So I'd say as far as our first 3 purple items, this is pretty much right in line with how I would value these in my own runs for most runs. Like I said, stats are fine, so if you need the stats, pick it up, but just know that you might be picking up an item basically without a passive if you don't have any stealth chance. Alright, next item is Versatile. Versatile is just a banger. There's really not too much to say about Versatile. 3 defense, 3 speed, 3 clarity. In its history, it's been better when having positive clarity was the only way to build clarity. Basically, you needed positive clarity to get any value out of clarity, so that was nice. But you also get +3 to your highest stat when it equips. So if you pick this up while you have high attack or high HP or high of any of these stats that are, being given to us by the item, you get +3 in that stat. So this can be really nice for your general stat builds. Like if you don't have a whole bunch of effects proccing, but you have really decent stats, this is just nice, like kind of a nice topping to those stats. And even though it doesn't necessarily enhance your build in any way, I think I'm going to put this at A, because you can use this literally in any build all the time. Like this is pretty much never going to be a bad item for you unless you specifically don't want speed and you don't want clarity. And even then, like if I'm going a negative clarity build, I might still pick this up just because I want the +3 in HP or attack or defense or whatever. So Versatile is just really solid all around, as the name would lead you to believe. All right, next item, Warrior's Kilt, or Warrior Kilt. All right, Warrior Kilt is another item that's kind of in the middle of things. +4 attack and +10% crit chance is actually pretty solid. I like when the secondary stats on these items are 10 or more. I feel like that's where you really start to feel the impact of picking up that item. And then the +4 attack is obviously solid. Any build, with the exception of like an Insidious build, can always benefit from more attack. So that's never really going to be a bad thing. And then the passive, I think, is sometimes slept on. I've been trying to give it more value recently, but you get +30% curse resistance. Basically meaning anytime you pick up a cursed potion, if you have 0 clarity, it's 50-50 split. If you have Warrior Kilt on while you take that cursed potion, it bumps you up to an 80-20% chance to succeed or fail, which could definitely help in the later game. If you don't have a ton of healing in your build, or you're like really scrounging for stats, this can help you with your cursed stat boosts and your cursed potions. It's not like a crazy passive, but it can get you out of a tight situation if you're sitting at like 3 or 4 HP and you're like, I need this cursed potion to work right now or the run's over. it can definitely make a pretty big impact. Also, if I remember correctly, Clarity gives you plus 1% curse resistance per point above 0. So if you are a fan of building Clarity and you pick up this item and you have 20 Clarity built, you have 100% resistance to cursed item. So you'll succeed every cursed item, which is quite nice. Overall, I'd say it probably lands in B, though. I'll always take Versatile over it unless I really, really need the attack. Because this is going to give me the majority of that attack stat if attack's my highest stat anyways. But it's probably kind of on par with Impactful. If I need more attack, I'll go Warrior's Coat. If I need more tankiness, I'll go Impactful. All right. So our last couple items here, Changeling Belt. Now, Changeling Belt, as I had so eloquently dubbed Channeling Belt, which is not what it is in one of my recent videos. Changeling Belt is ridiculous. Changeling Belt gives you plus 3 defense, plus 3 speed, plus 3 HP, which makes you incredibly tanky. Even that late in the game, getting 3 HP and 3 defense is huge. But its passive is where this item really shines. So, every 5 turns, not 5 combat turns, just 5 moves, you could be passing over a potion, it's going to tick down. Randomly transform a front stat card, a front stat boost, potion, or scroll into a different one. That alone makes this item nuts. So, let's just break it down by each thing that it lists. So, every 5 turns, you can pass over a potion until the potion turns into, you know, a cursed or non-cursed or a large or a small, whatever. 5 turns. Doesn't matter how you complete those turns. So stat boosts. You can change stat boost from anything that would give you, it could be a cursed plus 1 stat boost all the way up to a non-cursed plus 4, plus 5 stat boost. So you can get the best stat boost by just passing over it. Potions. You could go from a small cursed potion to a large uncursed potion. So from the worst to the best potions. And then scrolls. Once you get this item, you're probably more so in the realm of seeing purple and gold scrolls. Purple scrolls, you could basically go the rest of your run all chests being free because you can change every scroll into a key. You could amplify your damage by an incredible amount by getting purple explosions. You could start soul crafting all of your items by picking up multiple soul crafts, any items that you don't need the passives for. And then when you get into gold scrolls, you've got Final Form, which is arguably the best scroll in the game that you could just guarantee before you go into your final fight with the owl, which would effectively give this item plus 10 in every stat and then plus 5 splash damage plus what it already gives. What else could you get? You could get the Poisonous Scroll. That poisons everything in the room for 5, which is again really nice for the final boss, especially if you have like Soul Hourglass or something like that that damages enemies that are already damaged. The possibilities with this thing are really kind of endless, and you don't need to expend anything to proc the passive. As long as you have one card, which would be your stat boost potion or scroll, in front of you, and you have no other enemies with ranged attacks, you could just keep passing over that card until you get what you want. It really lets you choose literally whatever you want in your run. So definitely S tier, definitely incredible. There's no negative to it, so you can pick it up on every run, because even if you pass over something and accidentally change it to something you didn't want from what it already was, you can just keep cycling it until it comes back. So amazing. All right, and now, if I make sure I pronounce it correctly, yes, Channeling Kilt, which is what I was mistaking Changeling Belt for before. Channeling Kilt is also nuts. So Channeling Kilt is all about healing. So you get plus 3 attack, minus 3 defense, plus 6 HP, and plus 3 clarity. So the plus 3 clarity is already going to help your healing, but then the passive doubles down on that. So healing effects restore double the amount. So Even if you're negative clarity and you have no other way to heal, small potions are still healing you for 6, and large potions are healing you for 20. Not to mention, if you have any items that do heal, such as Living Corset, Living Helmet, I forget the mask name. Not Chugging Mask, it's the blue mask. But if you have any items that heal you, Bloodstone, it's doubling those heals as well. So if you have a Bloodstone, a Living Corset, and a Living Helmet, you're guaranteed on kill to heal for 8. And then potentially up to 10, or excuse me, no, that would be 12, depending on whether or not your Bloodstone procs. So up to 12 healing per kill is just nutty. Channeling kill, even though it reduces your defense, it gives you so much in other places that honestly, this can carry a run. I'd say it's probably also S. I'm just trying to think like across most builds, because you're always going to benefit from the potions. And going from 10, like a 10-point heal to a 20-point heal is enormous. And you're in the late game, so 3 defense shouldn't destroy your build. Plus, with everything else it gives you, I would say Channeling Belt, Channeling Kill is also S tier. This item's really, really, really good. All right, last couple. So we have, oh my gosh, I'm actually forgetting the name. Skirt of Visions. So Skirt of Visions is kind of a specific item to your build, but it's very potent when it's being leveraged. So plain and simple, Skirt of Visions just doubles your clarity. If you have negative clarity, it'll double it. If you have positive clarity, it'll double it. So this one, unfortunately, kind of gets the short end of the stick in the way that our tier list is made up, because this probably isn't going to give you a ton of value unless you're specifically building clarity. Going from 3 to 6 clarity or -3 to -6 clarity, you know, if you're not really focused on clarity, isn't going to do much for you. So filling a legendary slot with a passive that's going to basically do nothing would put this at like F tier. But if you are building into clarity, like if you have, you know, a couple of items that work off your negative clarity, or if you just want like a ton of crit chance and you're going positive clarity and you already have 20, 30 clarity built, then it's S tier. So Skirt of Visions kind of needs to be like in its own, I guess I can't put it over here because you guys can't see it. Skirt of Visions kind of needs to be like in its own category where it can't really be seen, because it really is just, if it works for you, it's amazing. If it doesn't, it's almost not worth ever picking up. For most builds, how would we rank it in most builds? Well, most builds without focusing on clarity means there's probably a 50-50% chance that you're positive or negative clarity, which drops this down a little bit, just because if you're negative clarity, it's definitely not good for you if you have no bonuses to negative clarity. If you are positive clarity, getting a couple extra points of clarity is fine, but if you get like, even if you got 5 points of clarity from this item, it's pretty lackluster for a legendary. So I think C is a good place to put it on most builds. Like I said, clarity build, nuts. Negative clarity build, S++, like off the screen. But otherwise, if you're negative clarity, it's literally F. Like, it doesn't do anything good for you. So I'd say most builds overall, unfortunately, it kind of gets the short end and it's pretty low. And I guess most builds based on how I normally build, because if I'm not building for clarity, I really don't care about clarity. All right, last item. Sacrificial Cloth, right? Yes, Sacrificial Cloth. All right. So, Sacrificial Cloth gives 4 speed, 5 HP, 10 dodge, 10 dodge chance, which is actually pretty solid. And then health potions give +3 max health instead of healing. This item is unfortunately pretty antiquated. There's other items in the same realm of what its passive does that just do it better. Consumption is better, which is a blue mask, because It gives you way more healing when you do pick up those items because it's giving you plus 7, 8 max HP and it's healing you for that 7. What else? There's one more that I'm missing. Oh, Vitality Robes, which gives you plus an HP every time you pick up an item, and you can still use potions. This item kind of stinks. If it was like... Honestly, this item either would need to be reworked or need to have like a significantly increased passive to... This item was just destroyed by consumption, honestly. Once I found consumption, I mean, I guess, okay, here's how I think it could be solid. If this gave you health potions give plus 7 max HP instead of healing, and it stopped at that, it would literally just be an upgraded version of consumption because you wouldn't lose stats when taking potions. But the plus 3, I think that's too much of a detriment to your healing from potions to value the extra max HP. Because, like, basically, if you have 0 clarity, it doesn't affect... Oh, excuse me. It doesn't affect small potions, because if you don't have any clarity, small potions are just going to heal you for 3. But you're also losing out on the 7 healing that you would get from large potions. Because now instead of healing for 10, even at 0 clarity, you're only going to heal for 3. Because gaining max health does also heal you. So this would need, like... I mean, maybe consumption without the negative part of its passive is too strong. So maybe even if it was like 6, like if they doubled the amount of health that you were getting from this item upon picking up potions. But yeah, it feels pretty bad in most builds because I value potions over that max HP. If I need max HP, I should have already built it. If I didn't, then that's my own fault. I don't think this item's really going to save me because even if I have that max HP, if I can't heal it back, it's kind of useless. So where would I put this? Probably C, which again, Skirt Divisions, please take with a grain of salt because like it's so good, but so useless depending on the use case. So I don't necessarily compare these two directly, but Sacrificial Cloth is definitely not great. All right, so that finishes up our leg slot tier list. Like I said, sorry about being away. I just was like mega sick and didn't want to do anything. But we're back now, and you'll have another video this week as well for our next slot, which I believe would be boots. But yeah, so if you did enjoy, leave a comment, leave a like, let me know what you think of the tier list, and we'll catch you in the next one.